anytime that I try to do a list of the best of or least best of, it causes a lot of discussion and debate. Coaching and GMs. So I was going to do a list of coaches who are likely to be fired, coaches who are iffy, and coaches who are safe. I decided to come up with coaches that I think are likely to be fired by the end of the season. So that would be either during the season or rapidly after the season's ended. And I did a list of coaches who are completely safe from here on. They have nothing to worry about. Even if their teams don't play well from here, it doesn't matter. And any coach I don't mention is in between. I don't know. And then I came up with best GMs in the NHL, and I had to go with the top 11. I wanted to go with the top 10, but if I cut out number 11, it would cut out a major name. And I hope I can defend why this person's in 11th place. All right. Coach is most likely to be fired. Number 4 on my list. I'm just looking over at the Canucks game right now because they're playing like crap in Arizona tonight. Glenn Gulletson in Calgary. I know they won tonight. Big overtime win. Out of nowhere, Ottawa controlled the puck most overtime, and then they take it. And when Gaudreau and Backlund have it on the breakaway, it's over. I felt bad for Conan. But Gulletson has to get Calgary into the playoffs, or he's in trouble. Calgary was built to win now. Number 3 on the list, I have Dave Tippett in Arizona. Why? Well, he's been there 8 years. This is his 8th season, and this would be his 5th out of the playoffs in a row. I know Dave Tippett has a contract. I know he'll get public support from the GM, who's a lot younger than Dave Tippett. But in the end, it's results. And it might be time to consider a change in Arizona. Number 2 on the list is Claude Julien. It's been talked about. It is likely. Now, I watched them beat Pittsburgh tonight. I don't know what happened. I don't understand, and I'm not getting my hopes up anymore. I'm just not. There's too many games that other teams have in hand on them. Although Toronto lost tonight and Ottawa lost and only got 1 point out of it, there's too many things that have to fall in place for Boston to get into the playoffs, and I just don't see it happening. And I could see Claude Julien being dispatched quickly. He's been in Boston. This is his 10th season, and this would be his 3rd out of the playoffs in the last 4 years. I think it's 4 years. It's 3 in a row. Shit, it's 3 in a row. Number 1. Yes, Winnipeg fans, it's Paul Maurice. They came back and beat Chicago tonight, and you could tell, like, the air went out of Chicago's United Center just quickly. And it's funny because I'm used to Chicago doing that to everybody else. So it was kind of nice to see that happen to Chicago and see it happen for the Jets. Um, I'm honestly pulling for them to turn this around and get into a playoff spot. I think it'd be fun to see as many Canadian teams in the playoffs as possible a year after they all missed. But Maurice is still really on the hot seat because if they miss the playoffs this year, this will be 3 and 4 years that they've missed the playoffs. Cheveldayoff is going to be looking for somebody to get rid of. Most of the core of the team is signed long term or very young, so Maurice takes the blame here, even though it's his goaltending that lets him down a lot. Now, who's safe? I'll make this quick. Dan Bilesma in Buffalo, Joel Quenneville in Chicago, of course, John Tortorella in Columbus, of course, Todd McClellan in Edmonton, Bruce Boudreau in Minnesota, Michel Therrien in Montreal, Mike Babcock in Toronto, and Barry Trotz in Washington. No matter what happens from here, those coaches are all completely safe. If I didn't name a coach, it means that, and that includes Randy Carlyle, it means that from here, if there was some sort of a collapse, they could be in trouble. I even wanted to put in the safe list Doug Weight right now, but we'll see what happens there. All right, best GMs in the NHL. So get ready with your comments, get ready with your downvotes, because here's where I'm going to have problems. Number 11 on the list, I'm jumping right into this, is Ken Holland in Detroit. Ken Holland gets onto this list for the Stanley Cups he created up until 2008, but it's gone downhill for him. And while he should have been able to see some of this coming, you can't blame him for Datsuk, you can't blame him for Zetterberg getting older, but this is a what have you done for me lately situation. And with Detroit ready to miss the playoffs for the first time in forever, and I admit it's been forever, Holland's moves haven't been awe-inspiring. They just haven't been. And I'm not saying he's at fault, just these 10 guys I think are ahead of him right now. Number 10, Chuck Fletcher. Chuck Fletcher, the smartest move he's made is giving Bruce Boudreau a team to work with. I give Bruce Boudreau full credit for what Minnesota's doing right now. That's why I don't put Fletcher a little higher than 10th. But Fletcher was smart enough to sign Eric Staal in the offseason, smart enough to keep players together and keep the core the same even after a couple of rough first round eliminations. And honestly, he is one of the best GMs in the league. This is very very difficult coming up with a list of guys. Number 9, Bob Murray in Anaheim. I would put him higher, but I think trading away Freddie Anderson could have been a mistake. I think between Anderson and Gibson, I like Anderson better as a goaltender, and I think Gibson's trade value would have been huge, and I think Anaheim would be in a more advantageous position for the playoffs if they'd been able to move Gibson and keep Anderson, and I think the pieces they could have got for Gibson would have been something. But that's quibbling. I am acknowledging that Bob Murray is one of the best GMs in the NHL. I just have him in number 9 because number 8 is Dean Lombardi in LA. Lombardi would be higher if he'd been able to transition this team better than he has without Jonathan Quick. Make it a team that doesn't rely on its goaltending as much as it has. And if he didn't keep taking on players with high salaries who aren't what they were, like a Marian Gaborik, or giving high salaries to a guy who probably will never live up to that contract, like a Dustin Brown. But he's in 8th place because they have won Stanley Cups with him as GM, and you can't argue with that result. Number 7, Doug Wilson in San Jose. Wilson would have been much lower on this list a couple years ago for me. I really felt that when the captaincy schmozzle was going on, I really felt that him potentially alienating a guy like Joe Thornton would cost him his job. He has managed to hold everything together, and San Jose is still one of the best teams in the league. Number 6, I have Lou Lamoriello from Toronto. And anti-Toronto people are going to say, well, wait a minute. All he did was draft Austin Matthews. But it's everybody else. It's the fact that all the rookies are stepping up. They lost tonight in Philly, okay? But that was one of the most hard-nosed games I've seen a team play this year, especially considering their youth. The team that's being built in Toronto, as much as we don't want to face it for the rest of us in Canada, it's special. There's something special going on in Toronto. We ignore it at our peril. So full props to Lou Lamoriello for that. That's why he's in 6th place. 5th place is Jarmo Kekalainen in Columbus. Sam Gagner was a stroke of genius. The Nick Foligno contract looked bad last year. Looks okay right now. Keeping guys like Jack Johnson looks like it was a smart move. And while I think going from McElhinney to Korpisalo is a step down for your backup, you're quibbling. You're splitting hairs at that point. And he really has stayed the course in Columbus when everybody else was saying just tear it all apart. And they look like a real Stanley Cup contender right now. In 4th place, I have Bryan McClellan in Washington. Bryan McClellan has managed to keep the team at or near the top for years now. They have had a lot of turnover, in terms of the support players, and they've overcome the loss of some big names, and they've managed to build this team up. And I honestly think McClellan is one of the better hockey minds right now. And I'll be interested to see how this works with Washington if Ovechkin starts to decay in terms of his offensive output or decides to go to the KHL. Be interesting to see what McClellan's able to do then. Number 3, Steve Yzerman. I know Tampa's bad right now. Tampa's pretty bad right now in the East. And they likely miss the playoffs unless they go on a hot streak. But his finagling of the salary cap to keep everybody there is nothing short of genius. So even now, as we go into next summer, and he's going to have salary cap problems again, I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be able to rise above it and figure it out and get it all straight. He is, in my mind, one of the smartest hockey people that there is. He learned from Ken Holland in Detroit, and he's fashioning his team after Detroit. And this is a down year for Tampa. I wouldn't bet against them winning a Stanley Cup next year. If they bottom out and if they win a draft lottery and they pick up a Nolan Patrick in the offseason, look out next year. Look out next year because there's so many good young pieces on this team. So many good players. So Steve Yzerman, despite the fact his team's mired in the muck right now, he's one of the best GMs in the league. Number 2, Jim Rutherford in Pittsburgh. What more is there to say? I mean, he brings in Mike Sullivan middle of last year. Stroke of genius. And the players they've got, the fact that guys like Rust and Sherry have been seamless fits with this team. And they seem to make smart moves at the draft table. They get Justin Schultz for next to nothing. And the thing with Justin Schultz was they bought low on him. They did. And then in the offseason, they waited. They didn't sign him on July 1st, but they did bring back Justin Schultz at a really good cap hit. And they waited a couple weeks into free agency to do it. So 29 other teams could have picked him up, and they didn't. So Pittsburgh, Rutherford has a good eye for talent. So number 1 GM, who is it? Is it Peter Chiarelli? No. Peter Chiarelli's not on the list because while he has managed to sign some good players, and Oilers fans are going to tell me why he should be on this list, he has offset some of the good moves he's made with baffling moves, and without Connor McDavid, this team is not a playoff team. That's just reality. I salute him for what he's set around McDavid to succeed, but without McDavid, they're not there. And they haven't made the playoffs yet. They haven't done anything in the playoffs yet, and it's hard for me to really completely commit to Chiarelli as one of the top 11 GMs in the NHL. Because then I'd have to say he's ahead of Ken Holland, and I'm not willing to say that. So number 1 is Stan Bowman in Chicago. Yeah, they got the best coach in Joel Quenneville, and they've got the best GM in Stan Bowman. Chicago, time and time again, have been at the top of the mountain and have had to sell because of salary cap issues. And they've managed to get better. I know they blew the lead against Winnipeg, and I know they've looked iffy their last few games out. But honestly, the fact that the Hawks are in the conversation, the fact that the Hawks are still one of the better teams in the league, is a testament to Stan Bowman's finessing of his lineup, figuring out who he can get rid of, who he needs to bring in, and he has a great eye for other teams. So when a Brendan Saad gets traded out, and you go, oh no, not Brendan Saad, and Anisimov comes in and is fantastic. Panarin getting signed, Brian Campbell being brought back, the fact that Steve Darling is a very good backup goaltender didn't necessarily show tonight against Winnipeg towards the end of the game, but he is really quite good. Let's see. I'm going to take a look here at Chicago. I apologize. Scott Darling. Steve Darling was a news guy here in Vancouver, so I apologize for that. Scott Darling. I don't think Steve Darling would be a good goaltender at all, and I mean no disrespect to him. And Hellebuck with a lot of saves tonight, but again, I'm not going to put Cheveldayoff in one of my top GM spots, and Armstrong's not going to be there with the recent events that have been going on in St. Louis. Players they've decided to keep over players they've lost. So, we'll see where things go from here. We'll see how this list works out in the offseason. But Bowman for me is the best. And it's tough because I'm not necessarily a Chicago fan, but I respect what the team is. And you'll notice I didn't mention Willie Desjardins. I didn't mention Jim Benning in terms of GM. And I didn't mention Lindy Ruff in terms of coach, or Jim Nill in terms of GM. Jim Nill was praised a lot for getting Jason Spezza out of Ottawa. I was more concerned with bringing in Antti Niemi and staying with Kari Lehtinen, and so far I've been right. Getting rid of Jokipakka to bring in a rental and Chris Russell, I was right. Jokipakka's not anything more than a 5'6" guy, but the fact that he is an NHL level defenseman and you just get rid of him, no. No. Stop. Alrighty. So that's it for me for now on this issue. Let me know in the comments below who you think are the better GMs. I went through all 30 teams, so if you're thinking, oh, he must have skipped this guy, I didn't skip anybody. I just looked and went, no. So I apologize if I left anybody out who upsets people. If I missed out on a coach who's on a hot seat, if you think there's a coach on the hot seat that I didn't mention, go ahead and let me know. I didn't count Willie Desjardins because even though the Canucks are going to lose this game to Arizona, there's virtually no chance Desjardins gets fired at the end of the season with the fact that they're close. As long as the Canucks are in the playoffs or close to the playoffs, even if it's not real, it's just based on loser points, he'll still keep his job. So, yeah, that's it for me for this on this issue. Thanks for watching, and if you're just browsing through, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Your friends are doing it. Everybody's doing it. It's an exciting time. It's a fun thing to do, and you'll feel better when you do it.